spent 34 years in construction management, and the one thing this industry teaches you is how to read a structure. Not just the blueprints, the actual bones of a thing. You walk into a building and you know, before anyone tells you whether it's going to hold or whether it's already failing from the inside. You develop a sense for it. The hairline fractures in the plaster. The doors that no longer sit flush in their frames. The floors that have started to slope so gradually that only someone who knows what to look for would ever notice. I should have applied that same eye to my own family. I'm 63 years old. I grew up in Sudbury. The son of a nickel miner who worked the Creighton shaft for 31 years and never once complained about it. My father believed that a man's value was measured by what he built and what he left behind. I took that seriously. Maybe too seriously. My wife's name is Diane. We met at Laurentian University in 1994. She was studying education. I was in civil engineering. We got married in the summer of 1987 at a small church on Lawn Street. Her parents came, my parents came, maybe 40 people in total. Nothing fancy. Afterward, we ate pierogi and cabbage rolls at her aunt's place and danced in the backyard until the neighbors started leaving their porch lights on as a hint. It was the best night of my life. We had one daughter, Melissa, born in 1990. She was everything to both of us. The construction business was good to me. By my mid-40s, I had my own project management firm. Nothing enormous, but steady. Municipal contracts, commercial builds, a few residential developments outside the greater Sudbury area. I employed 14 people at the peak. I paid into the business, reinvested constantly, kept the books clean. Diane had gone back to teaching after Melissa started school and she was good at it. Genuinely good. The kind of teacher parents request by name. But her salary was her own. The house, the vacations, Melissa's university tuition at Weston, the cottage on Ramsey Lake, all of that came from what I built. I'm not saying this was sympathy. I'm saying it because it matters later. Melissa graduated in 2013 and met a man named Tyler at a marketing conference in Toronto the following year. He was from Oakville originally, worked in sales for a software company, drove a leased BMW, and wore the kind of cologne you could smell before he rounded the corner. He was 31 when they met, 4 years older than Melissa, and he had the handshake of a man who had practiced it in a mirror. I tried. I want to be clear about that. I tried with Tyler. He and Melissa moved in together in 2015, got engaged in 2016, married in the summer of 2017 in a ceremony at a vineyard in Prince Edward County that cost me $62,000. I wrote the check without blinking. I figured it was once in a lifetime and she was happy, and that was the point. After the wedding, things shifted in ways I didn't immediately name. Small things at first. Tyler and Melissa bought a condo in Mississauga, a nice one, on the 14th floor, 2 bedrooms, parking included. They needed help with the down payment. Diane and I gave them $45,000 as a wedding gift, above and beyond the ceremony. Tyler accepted it with a handshake and a clap on the back and said, "You won't regret this, Don." That's my name. Don. Donald Raymond Keating. He was wrong. I did regret it. Not the money. I want to be precise about this. I regret that I mistook the transaction for connection. I thought giving them something real would build something real between us. What it actually did was establish a pattern, and patterns in construction and in family life are very hard to interrupt once they're set. Over the next 4 years, Diane and I helped with the car when Melissa's Civic finally gave out. We helped when Tyler's commission structure changed at work and they had a difficult quarter. We paid for the IVF treatments when they were trying to start a family. 2 rounds at a clinic in Toronto, close to $18,000 total. And I would do it again without hesitation because that had nothing to do with Tyler and everything to do with my daughter. They have twins now, a boy and a girl, born in 2021. They are beautiful children and I love them without reservation. That part is not complicated. What became complicated was everything else. I noticed, somewhere around 2022, that the calls between Diane and Melissa had a rhythm to them. They went well until they didn't. Until there was a reason. A new mattress they'd been looking at. A trip to Portugal they were thinking about. A bathroom renovation. Always something. And Diane would mention it to me the way you mention weather, casually, in passing, and somehow, within a few weeks, I would have written another check. I don't think Diane did this consciously. I want to believe that. I think she wanted her daughter to be comfortable and she knew I would provide it, and she didn't examine the mechanism too closely because examining it would have meant confronting something she didn't want to confront. I understand that. I'm not angry at Diane for that part. What I am angry about, what I will carry for a long time, is what happened on the evening of February 14th, 2 years ago. Melissa had been planning a surprise birthday party for Tyler for weeks. He was turning 39 and she wanted to do something significant before the big 40. She'd rented a private room at a restaurant in Mississauga, one of those new places with the exposed brick and the $110 steaks, and invited about 30 of Tyler and Melissa's friends. Diane had known about it for weeks. She'd helped Melissa pick the venue. She'd been to the restaurant for a walkthrough. I had not been invited. I found that out by accident about 10 days before the party, when I overheard part of a phone call between Diane and Melissa. When I asked Diane about it directly, she said Tyler had wanted to keep it to his cloud, his words apparently, and that there was nothing personal in it. It was just the kind of party where a father-in-law would feel out of place. She said this gently, and I nodded and said I understood. I didn't understand, but I let it go. The 14th was a Tuesday. I'd had a long day. We were in the middle of tendering the contract for a new arena project in Sudbury and the documentation had been brutal. I came home around 6:30, made myself a plate of leftovers from the fridge, and sat at the kitchen table in the house I'd owned for 22 years. Diane had already left for Mississauga. She'd been getting ready when I walked in, dressed up, looking lovely actually, and she'd kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up." I ate alone. It was fine. I've eaten alone before. At around 8:15, I started feeling strange. I thought at first it was the cold I'd been fighting. I'd had a scratchy throat since the weekend, and I took some ibuprofen and went to sit in the living room. But the feeling didn't pass. There was a pressure across my chest, heavy and specific, and my left arm had gone oddly numb in a way that wasn't like anything I'd felt before. I know what that combination means. Anyone my age who's done any reading knows what that combination means. I called 911 myself. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. I remember being impressed by that, even while I was lying on the kitchen floor where I'd ended up after the call. I remembered one of them, a young woman, couldn't have been more than 25, telling me to stay still and talking to me the whole time they worked. She had a leaf spin on her jacket. I remember that detail with strange clarity. They took me to Health Sciences North. The cardiology team was there when we arrived. I was in emergency surgery within 2 hours. A stent procedure to open a blocked artery. The surgeon told me afterward that I'd had what they call a STEMI, a serious one. He said the outcome would have been very different if I'd waited another hour to call. At some point during or after the procedure, someone on the nursing staff called Diane's number. She had listed as my emergency contact for 36 years. She didn't answer. They called twice. No answer. A nurse, a kind older man named Patrick, who checked on me through the night, told me the next morning that they had tried to reach my family and had not been successful. He said it carefully, the way medical people learn to deliver news that isn't about a diagnosis. He said, "We weren't able to get through to your wife. Is there anyone else you'd like us to try?" I told him not to bother. I lay in that hospital bed on the night of February 14th and I thought about my father going down into the Clayton shaft every single day for 31 years. I thought about what he built and what he left behind. I thought about the hairline fractures you miss when you're not looking for them. Diane arrived the next morning at 11. She walked into my room carrying a Tim Hortons coffee and a paper bag with a breakfast sandwich in it, and she looked surprised, genuinely surprised, at how pale I was. She said, "Oh God, Dawn, they said it was a cardiac event. I didn't think. You seemed fine when I left." She had not answered because she had turned her phone to silent for the party. She had seen the missed calls the next morning and assumed it was administrative, a test result, a follow-up. It did not occur to her, she told me, that it would be the kind of call she needed to answer that night. Melissa arrived that afternoon. Tyler did not come. Melissa cried when she saw me. That was real. I believe that was real. But she also spent a portion of her visit texting. And when I asked her, quietly, whether she'd known about the missed calls the night before, she said, "Mom didn't see them until this morning. There was nothing anyone could have done." That was the sentence that reorganized everything I understood about my life. There was nothing anyone could have done. I was in surgery. I could have died. My wife's phone was silenced in a restaurant 40 minutes away, and my daughter, who knew about the party, who had organized the party, had not thought to check on her father that evening. And the explanation, delivered to a man lying in a hospital bed with a stent in his coronary artery, was that there was nothing anyone could have done. I spent 6 days in hospital. I had time to think. I am a project manager. Thinking is my actual job. Not the hammers and the scaffolding, but the planning, the sequencing, the contingency. I spent 6 days in that bed doing what I do, quietly, without telling anyone. The first thing I did when I got home was make an appointment with a lawyer, not a family lawyer, an estates lawyer. A woman named Claire Fontaine who worked out of an office on Elm Street and who I'd used years earlier for some commercial property work. I told her I wanted to review my will, my power of attorney, and the structure of my assets. She did not ask why, and I appreciated that. The picture that emerged from those meetings was clarifying in the way that only honest accounting can be. My firm, which I still owned outright, was worth approximately $2.3 million. The house was paid off, assessed at just under $600,000. The cottage on Ramsey Lake, which I'd purchased in 2004 and renovated in stages over the years, was assessed at $450,000. I had RRSPs, a non-registered investment account, and a modest pension from my years before I'd gone independent. Claire walked me through all of it methodically, and when she finished, I sat across from her desk and said, I need to change some things. What I changed over the following 8 weeks was everything. The business I transferred into a new holding structure. A move I'd been considering for tax reasons for several years anyway, so it raised no flags. The cottage I listed quietly with a realtor in the Sudbury area. Priced right, and it sold in 3 weeks to a family from Timmins who wanted it badly enough not to negotiate hard. The sale closed while Diane was visiting a sister in Victoria for 10 days in April, a trip I had encouraged and helped pay for, which was not entirely selfish of me. Claire connected me with a financial advisor who helped me move the liquid assets. Some went into a trust structured in a way that Claire advised me on carefully. Some went to a charity I'd supported for years, a housing organization in Sudbury that builds affordable homes for families transitioning out of precarious situations. I wrote that check with the steadiest hand I've ever had. The house was more complicated. It was jointly owned. I couldn't sell it without Diane, and I didn't want to do anything that crossed a legal line. What I did instead was retain a real estate lawyer, begin the process of formally separating the asset, and serve Diane with divorce papers. She received them on a Wednesday morning in late April. I was not home. I had arranged to stay with an old colleague named Frank, who had a place near Lake Wanapittai and who asked no questions when I called him and said I needed somewhere to be for a while. Diane called 17 times that day. Melissa called 8 times. Tyler called once, which surprised me. Though his voicemail was not sympathetic, it was the voice of a man calculating an exposure. I did not answer any of them. I had left a letter on the kitchen table, 4 pages, handwritten not because I'm sentimental, but because a handwritten letter cannot be claimed to be a misunderstanding. It said everything I needed to say. It described the night of February 14th in precise factual language. It described the pattern of transactions over the previous 7 years in the total sum, which I had calculated with Claire's help, $231,000, not including the wedding, not including the IVF. It said that I had loved Diane for 36 years and that I believed some portion of that love had been real and mutual. It said I did not believe her presence in my life in its current form was consistent with my survival, and I meant that literally, not dramatically. The last paragraph said, I hope you find your way to understanding this. I don't expect you to forgive it quickly, but I am 63 years old and I had a heart attack alone on the kitchen floor and no one in this family thought to check on me. I can't organize my remaining years around people who are not organized around me. The divorce proceedings were not gentle. Diane hired a lawyer from Toronto who specialized in high asset family law, but the asset transfer had been legal, structured correctly, and executed before the divorce was initiated. The cottage was sold. The business had been restructured in a way that Claire had anticipated scrutiny on and prepared for thoroughly. The house, jointly owned, was eventually sold as part of the settlement. The proceeds split. Diane received her share. I am not interested in punishing her financially. I am interested in my own life. Tyler, as it turned out, had been managing a debt situation that Melissa had only partially disclosed to me. There was a line of credit. A second one actually that had been opened using some financial documentation that Claire's team flagged when reviewing my estate. Documentation that bore my name and address in connection with an account I had never authorized. Claire contacted the relevant institutions. The matter was referred to the appropriate authorities without any action required from me personally. I mention this not with satisfaction exactly. It's more complicated than satisfaction. But because it happened, and it changed the shape of things considerably for Tyler and Melissa in the months that followed. The last time I saw Melissa was at a Tim Hortons in Sudbury, 4 months after she received my letter. She had driven up from Mississauga without Tyler. She sat across from me with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup and she asked me very quietly if there was any version of this where I came back. I told her the truth, that I didn't know and that the answer depended on things that hadn't happened yet. She asked about the grandchildren. I told her that my relationship with the twins was separate in my mind from everything else and that I intended to maintain it if she allowed it. She nodded for a long time without saying anything. Before she left, she said, "I didn't know that night that it was serious." I told her I believed her. I do, actually. What I also believe is that she hadn't thought to wonder. That not once in the hours her mother's phone sat silenced on a table in a Mississauga restaurant had Melissa thought to call her father. Not to check, just to check. That omission is the thing I am still learning to carry. I am living in a rental apartment now on the 7th floor of a building on Notre Dame Avenue in Sudbury. It's smaller than anything I've lived in since university. I have a view of the city I've worked in for 30 years, and in the evenings when the light is right, I can see the slag heaps from the old Falcon Bridge operations on the horizon. Those strange lunar hills that Sudbury is famous for, that people who've never been here find alien, and people who grew up here find strangely beautiful. My father worked for 31 years underground and came home every night smelling like rock dust and made supper and sat at the table and asked about our days. He died at 77 in his own house, surrounded by people who loved him and made no mistake about it. I am 63. I have had one heart attack and survived it alone. I've rebuilt the financial structure of my life with the same patience I've applied to every project I've ever managed. I wake up in the morning and I drink my coffee, and I look at that view and I think about what I'm building now and who it's for. It's for me. For the first time in a very long time, it is entirely for me. My cardiologist says my recovery has been good, better than expected actually. She adjusted my medications in January and told me that men who make significant life changes after a cardiac event sometimes show outcomes that surprise even her. I didn't tell her the details of my life changes, but I smiled at that and it was a real one. Some mornings I drive out toward Ramsey Lake, past the road that used to turn off toward the cottage. I don't stop. I don't need to. I'm not looking back at what I left there. I'm reading the structure ahead. And for the first time in a long time, what I see is solid. There's a moment in construction when you realize a structure can't be repaired. It has to come down. Not because you want to demolish it, not out of anger, but because the foundation is compromised and anything you build on top of it will eventually fail anyway. That moment, when you finally see it clearly, is not dramatic. It's just quiet and certain. That's what February 14th was for me. I've thought a lot about cause and effect in the month since. Not in a bitter way. Or at least, I'm trying not to. But honestly and clearly, the way I'd assess any project. What happened to Diane and Melissa and Tyler didn't come out of nowhere. It was the accumulated result of choices made over years. Small ones mostly. The choice to take without acknowledging. The choice to assume someone would always be there. The choice to silence a phone because nothing in their experience had ever made them believe the call would matter. That's not cruelty. I want to be careful about that. I don't think Diane is a cruel person. I think she made a series of decisions, each one reasonable seeming in isolation, that added up to something she never intended. That's how most damage happens in families and in buildings alike. What I had to reckon with was my own part in it. Because I had choices too. I chose to keep writing checks without having honest conversations. I chose to interpret silence as contentment. I chose for years to be so useful to everyone around me that I never stopped to ask whether any of it was mutual. A man can be very good at providing and still be completely absent from his own life. I was good at that. What the hospital bed gave me, and I know this sounds strange, was clarity. 6 days of it. No project files, no contractor calls, no one needing anything from me. Just the actual facts of my situation, laid out without the noise. And what I saw, when I looked at it honestly, was that I had spent decades building a life that other people lived in while I maintained the structure from the outside. I'm not that man anymore. What I've learned, what I'm still learning, is that real integrity isn't just about keeping your word to other people. It's about keeping your word to yourself, about knowing what you will and will not accept, and having the courage to act on that knowledge, even when it costs you something, even when it costs you the version of your life you thought you were living. That takes a particular kind of strength that I don't think I had in my 50s. Maybe you have to be brought low enough to find it. Maybe it takes lying on a kitchen floor in Sudbury on Valentine's Day with your arm going numb before you finally decide that your life belongs to you. I think about my father sometimes. He went underground every day for 31 years and he never once stopped knowing who he was. I spent 34 years in construction management. And the one 34 years in construction management. And the one thing is in construction management. It is how doubt the most important structure I ever had to build was the one I kept putting off. The one that was just for me.